If you've given up on love, you might want to read this book. If you're with somebody that cuts your ambition in half, cuts your ability in half, trumps on you, all of those things, just be single. Like, that's what I'm just like, I don't understand the concept of trying to lower your standards just so you can have the title of being married. It's okay, everything's fine. Like, everything's okay. Guys, I might cry. This book just gives me so much joy to talk about, and I can't wait to share what I have learned. Fiction is like a long lost friend for me. I've been focused on building my knowledge through really dense non-fiction books that are great, but sometimes just feel like all I'm doing is stuffing my mind with a lot of information. I want to have fun. I want to live in fairy tale land. I want to have an imagination visually that is beyond learning about neurology and the amygdala. I want to be so immersed in a story where I don't even recognize what is around me, almost to the point where I'm tripping and forgetting because I am so locked into a book. I want to feel like I can't even hear the train, I don't know, like what stopped this. Like, I've missed stops because of this. I have missed stops on the train because of this book. That's how immersed I've been, and I've missed that feeling, and I haven't had that feeling since I was pretty much a young teenager. So this book has just changed so much for me. If you don't do fiction, if you don't read fiction, this is your sign to get into it and make reading fun again and feel like you can waste time. In a world that is so focused on hustling, getting your goals together and making money and all of those things, which I'm such an advocate for, and I believe in self-development, personal development, and getting the money. But also, you shouldn't feel guilty for wasting time in this day and age, like you waste time with God or you waste time on a book. Like, all in air quotes, because it's not wasting time, it's actually valuable for your mental health if you have the right read or thing that you're doing is valuable for your physical health, even if you're not seeing it. So do it. Okay. So this book is called Redeeming Love. It's by somebody called Francine Rivers, who is a Christian fiction author. She does a lot of stuff on love and does a lot of true biblical based stories and beyond. I am saying this all based on what I've read because this is the first book that I've read by her. I don't really know a thing about her until the end of this book, which actually talks about her vision behind why she wrote Redeeming Love. She's become like a New York Best Time seller, which is obviously very understandable. And she talks about, it's so interesting, she talks about how she actually had writing as an idol in her life, and then she received the Lord. She stopped writing for a while, and her idol was no longer writing. She served and revered the Lord, and then the Lord brought her back into writing, and the first book was Redeeming Love when she read the book of Hosea. And what's so interesting is that idolatry is quite a big theme in Redeeming Love, in terms of the main character Angel making her husband Michael, eventually when she begins to love him, making him an idol and making him her god, and she worshipped Michael essentially. And it was a pure and beautiful love, but it goes to kind of show us that yes, you can purely love somebody that's in your life, your partner, but there's no idol, there's no idol before God. There is no other master before God. God is a jealous God and he wants you. So kind of showing that journey of how the actual character in the story had to come up her space of idolatry into finding the Lord, and how that kind of is parallel with Francine, who had to come out of the idolatry of writing and receive God as her God, was so interesting to read. And it's so nice to see people's personal stories kind of woven into what they're actually writing, which is fictional. But all of these have such real life elements that are so interesting. The book is essentially about this. It's kind of set in the, I don't know, it's set in the 1800s, I believe. Yeah, it's in California. Wonder what it was like back then, actually. That's really interesting to know. But you can imagine kind of the terminology, the things they were wearing. I feel like the things they wore back then was even better quality than we have now. Like, they're talking about silk, they're talking about things are hand woven, like people were sewing. Plaid type of dresses. That's what I'm seeing in my head, I don't know. But also based on the words in the book, that's kind of the scene of what the women are wearing. The guys are farmers and working, and like they know how to, like, the men are men. Let's say that. The men are men. They're using their strength for things to take care of themselves and their family. And it's about this woman who was sold into prostitution at the age of 8 and knew that for basically most of her life, and had a lot of tragedies and sad things happen to her, and was taken advantage of by multiple men, and was sold into a brothel, which is basically a space where they hold women who are in prostitution. And she had to give her life to sex, and that was how she made money for a living. And she was sold ideas that men are not interested in love, and that they only want one thing, and that love doesn't exist. It doesn't last. It's only for, even if they do love you, it will never last. She had tons of married men come and pay for half an hour with her to sleep with her. So imagine kind of growing up in that kind of landscape, and the main kind of anchor that kind of set her mind on this idea that men don't want you for anything but this, or this idea of women not being wanted or only being valuable for one thing, came from mainly her upbringing, and her father didn't want her as a child. She overheard her father saying to her mother that she wished she aborted the child, that he doesn't want anything to do with the child. A lot happened in this story. So much happened. And this is kind of supposed to be parallel to the book of Hosea in the Bible, where God asks the guy in the book is called Michael. God asks Hosea to marry Gomer, who is a prostitute, and consistently go after her, and have her children, and then consistently go after her even when she leaves and cheats. So that's kind of the synopsis. So I've been in a lot of different mental regions and spaces whilst reading this book. I constantly shift between the hopeless romantic and the avid hater of love. I think in the very, very depths of my soul that I will find a good romantic love. Or rather, I believe that romantic love will find me. And I believe that it will be good. Out of faith, I believe that it is my destiny. But without my faith, and with my emotions kind of in the mix, and my insecurities, and thinking too hard on both past and current experiences, I see love as a distant fantasy that I cannot attain, experience, or feel for myself, or taste for myself. Yeah, it's made me feel punished in many ways. But this is where the book comes in, and the book has redeemed so much for me. But it's made me feel like a bundle of emotions. Like, it's made me feel hopeful, it's made me feel expectant, it's made me feel grateful, it's made me feel jealous, it's made me feel envious, it's made me feel angry, it's made me feel frustrated, it's made me feel both belief, and it's made me feel both unbelief as well. So I thought to kind of split it into what I loved and then what I didn't love, and then kind of just give you an overall view. This is kind of random and not about the book. I loved how it sparks conversation. Because this book is very big, when I'm going out, it only fits in some of my bags. It doesn't fit in all of my bags. So sometimes I'll just kind of carry it like this, like a cute little, like, accessory. And people just look at it or ask me, oh, what's that? Because I just loved talking to people about it and say, guys, it's a really good book. It's based on the book of Hosea. Like, I'm loving it so far, etc., etc. So I just like things that spark conversation. It's been brought up at least probably 5 times. What I loved about the book itself was the dialogue, explaining the voice of the character, the voice of God, and the voice of the enemy, and explaining the differences and also the similarities and how they all kind of play together. It was obvious who was who, but it was also interesting to see how, okay, this sounds quite similar to this, depending on what headspace you're in. And it shows kind of the reality of the constant conflict. So I think what was interesting was seeing the progression of Angel's character. So Angel was obviously the prostitute, and how from the beginning towards the middle, and quite a large portion of the book, you'd see the interplay of her emotion, her feeling, what she's thinking, and what the enemy is saying to her, and how those were more aligned because of the headspace she was in, because of what she believed and the lies that she was constantly told. And then you see the progression of how towards the end of the book, less of the enemy's voice was in her life, until basically it wasn't anymore, and more of the Lord's voice was in her life. And you'd see her voice would align less with the enemies and more with the Lord, as she, number one, grew in her relationship with Michael, which is a really big anchor, and also went to find God for herself. And then you also kind of see from Michael's point of view, who's kind of heroic, who comes to kind of save Angel's soul and bring her to this marriage, out of prostitution and into helping her in a relationship with the Lord. But you also see this guy is a human who also has his own emotion and desires and frustrations with having to actually deal with a really, 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 really stubborn prostitute or girl. And you see the moments where, for the most part, he's very in tune with the Lord, and his voice matches more so with the Lord, and he's open to hearing what the Lord says. But then when he's in fits of anger and rage, or feeling desires that he doesn't want to feel, you see the voice of the enemy come in, and he's kind of more aligned with that, and he's kind of ignoring or not listening, or just in a state where he's more vulnerable to the voice of the enemy. And the reason I find that very interesting is because it just depicts the reality of kind of the human life that we live every single day. What it's like to tussle between both voices, depending on your emotion or how you're feeling at the time, and having to decide which one, you're going to listen to. And the reality of how much easier it is to listen to one or the other dependent on the state that you are in or the mood that you were in at the time. So this book was extremely redemptive for my soul. I wrote, it rewired my brain to expect love and reminded my brain to retain my standards. And it's something that has really been playing on my heart recently. I had a conversation with my friend about just the state of the market of men, but also kind of just that sense of there still being hope, even though the world kind of pictures it as like there's not really much hope, there's not really much, they're all married already, and it's like, no, that's not the case. You just have a small circle that you think is the whole of the Christian community, and it's actually not. There's so much more people out there, but you feel like you've met everybody because you've not met a new person in the last 2 months. But the reality is, and everybody's kind of telling you to open your eyes and shine your eyes in your community, and maybe that's not actually what's meant to happen. For some it is, but for some it isn't. But the point I'm trying to make is that my standards don't need to lower because I'm not seeing what is for me. And based on a book that is, though it is fiction, it is not far from reality. Why would I lower anything? I don't get, like, I just don't subscribe to mediocrity. I don't subscribe to low standards. I don't even subscribe to substandards. I don't understand. No, if you, like, it's like Paul says, you might as well just be single then. Like, you are better off single. If you know that you cannot grow, go faster together, or one can chase 1,000 and two can chase 10,000, which doesn't even mathematically make sense, but it shows the supernatural power of God. If that is not possible with somebody, they're not elevating you. If you're with somebody that cuts your ambition in half, cuts your ability in half, trumps on you, all of those things, just be single. Like, that's what I'm just like, I don't understand the concept of trying to lower your standards just so you can have a title of being married and appear spiritually mature, which doesn't make any sense, but that's a whole other thing. But it just reminded me that, like, it's okay, everything's fine. Like, everything's okay. Live at the pace at which your feet walk. Like, it's fine. I think the beauty of the story was helping me to see love more physically, even though it was in my imagination. I can see more physically, and it can kind of fill in the holes of the areas of my life where I don't see it. And it can give me the hope that I need to receive. Because, and I think this is why these things are important. This is why I don't think movies and books are bad unless, they're really perverted, of course. There are pure stories out there that depict love closely aligned with how God sees it. But I think it's important because there's a lot of people who just don't have that access fully in their lives. And I'm not talking about like platonic love or familial love or all those things. Like, those things can be accessible to some, but romantic love is a completely different thing. And I'm not saying you have to, but I feel like if you want to, you shouldn't feel like you can't understand it from another person's point of view. I do think there's obviously room and space for you to develop feelings of jealousy and envy and frustration. I think that's just very normal emotions that you will feel when you experience the feeling of something that somebody else has that you don't have. That's just extremely normal. Your job is just to give it to the Lord. I think that's quite literally it. But you can't just avoid. It's like the same, like, if you go to your friend's wedding, like, for a lot of people the feeling of like jealousy is almost inevitable, but you can't just say, oh, because I'm jealous, I'm not gonna go to my friend. Like, you can't just avoid situations because you think it's hard and you're gonna feel emotions that you don't want to feel. You just have to learn to actively continually give things to the Lord. Yeah.
Okay, hey guys, I thought Edith and Angela would come in to say that I'd want to preface that I'm not condoning jealousy and envy on a prolonged level and allowing it to ruminate. I am basically saying that the best you can do is to give it to the Lord. I'm trying not to condone this idea of self-deprecation and feeling better about yourself by degrading yourself with lots of jealousy. No, with lots of feelings of hatred towards your jealousy and envy. And I'm trying to normalize an experience that a lot of people experience. It's the same way that people have kind of demonized lust in women. It's a whole different tangent, but like, and kind of made it this taboo topic for them to not talk about, that they ultimately extremely condemn themselves when they feel those feelings in comparison to the average man who is more open to share about it in like a testimony or something. For women, it's more of a like, I need to make myself feel bad about this until this goes away. I think the same is with jealousy and envy, especially in women. This feeling that you must completely condemn yourself into feeling like condemn yourself until you forgive yourself, and condemn yourself to feel like you've done your due diligence of ridding yourself of the jealousy and the envy in that moment. Does this make sense? I feel like it makes sense. It's just that you have to like open your ear a bit. But yeah.
I think it's good to see physically how love is presented in other different kinds of stories. It allows you to see the possibilities and not kind of be single-minded in what you've, if you've only seen kind of one perspective, it allows you to kind of open your mind. So whether it's a movie or a book, these are great things.
Hi, Editing Angela is back. Again, not condoning maladaptive thinking and fantasies, not condoning watching movies to arouse certain feelings and stuff. But what I'm saying is that, sorry, my laptop is hissing so much. I need a new one. What I'm saying is that most people, or a lot of people, have only been exposed to one kind of romantic love. When you look at, the reason I said platonic and familial love are not kind of good parallels or good examples. Like, yes, you can feed off of that kind of love that you experience in your life and enjoy that, but that is a communal love. A romantic love is between one person and another. Therefore, it's not something you would see in your average day-to-day. Like, you're not going to see that played out in like your friends, like relationships and marriages. You're only going to see it for most people like within their parents. So if that's a single kind of reference point that you have, that could actually even be more detrimental going into a relationship and marriage, because that's all you know and have seen. But if you expose yourself to healthy kinds of love online or through books, and it doesn't even have to be a fictional book. I want to preface, because recently I've gone back to my other book on emotional intelligence, and I'm actually learning about the psychological side of what causes fights, what even a good fight is in marriage, what are the needs of both a man and a woman in terms of dialogue when there is a certain discourse or a disagreement, or the ability to even disagree healthily. Like, that is something you can also learn, as well as having the other side of reading a fictional book. I think that hybrid is actually a really good way to understand, especially if you're not actively experiencing love in your life, like in a romantic sense. I don't know. Actually, I do know. Yeah, do that.
This book, obviously, as extreme as the circumstances is, like, it's not really that you will meet, a prostitute who was sold into prostitution for her whole life, whole childhood, and then was saved by a man who knew it was his calling to get this woman out of prostitution. I think the book is still relatively like normal in its portrayal of their lives. Like, he's a farmer and she's become a farmer's wife, and they just kind of do farmer things, and she just cooks and he does this and that, and it's just quite a normal life. And I think I really liked how normal the book was. The fact that like it was normal, it was healthy, and it's what kind of society calls it like boring love. It's interesting because there were moments where she would try to make it unhealthy because that's all she knew. Like, she just kind of thought this was too good to be true. Like, what do you mean this is going well? Why is it going well? There's got to be something that's coming, like a storm that's coming that I won't be, that is gonna like bring me down, and I don't want to fall in love with him because that would make it that much worse. That expectation of toxicity is something that is so prevalent within our community and society now, that we don't appreciate boring love, in the sense that we don't appreciate normal love day to day. Nothing extravagant. We're just with each other, and that's pretty much it. The character Duke is like the guy that basically, horrible man, horrible. He's like the Satan in flesh. He was sleeping with her when she was like 8. He stopped her from having children, and he filled her with a lot of lies. I think he was probably one of the worst when it came to the words that he said to her that made her think. Like, he was in her dreams a lot, so he played a really big part in her way of thinking. And I was thinking of how he kind of mimics the enemy in terms of the way that the enemy will try and entice you with like things that seem glamorous, and enticing her with like riches of like, oh, like, I'm dressing you in silk and I'm feeding you this, I'm feeding you steak, I'm giving you everything you need, that's all you need, kind of making prostitution seem like this, like this is the best that you can get, like kind of putting the glaze over her eyes. Toxicity is are the things that amplify your nervous system, and when you're used to kind of that up and down state of being, you can just see when you're kind of a bit zen, you just feel like, oh, something is rising, something's gonna blow up essentially, but it doesn't have to be like that. The other thing that I liked or I loved was that it gave me a completely different outlook to the book of Hosea in the Bible. In a time where last year was a bit hazy for me, and there was a time where I didn't want to talk to the Lord, I didn't want to see him. And I came across the book of Hosea, I think, at a time, and I heard about how, it's about how God told a man to marry a prostitute and keep going back to her even if she leave him and cheat and all of that. I was just like, why would God do that? I don't understand. Like, this is the guy. Like, life was hard enough already. Why are you making this man go after this woman? I don't understand it. But I realized, again, with reading this book, that you have to look at it from the right mind, or else you just won't understand it. I started reading Hosea with my friend, and I was seeing God's relentless love for Israel, and it made sense, and how that obviously relates to us. And I think, again, that can sound like just very pretty words, like, oh my gosh, God loves you so much that he would do, like, it's just it. But until it becomes like a concrete understanding, which is still kind of concreting itself for me, but I think at the time that I read it, I was like, oh, this is clicking, and I'm so glad for God's Kairos moments, because I know that my heart wouldn't have been ready to receive it a few months ago. I think I'm, as a very visual and imaginative person, Michael was a very core part of helping me understand that. Like, Michael in the book being that physical representation of who God was for us, who God is for us, and who he was for Israel, helped me, because the story was drawn out. And obviously the Bible is like detailed, but it's not like telling you the day in, day out. Whereas with Redeeming Love, it kind of it draws out the book of Hosea and gives you like their everyday life and each emotion that this person is feeling. Yeah. And each emotion that this person is feeling, which I think is important to actually, which helps me. I also love how humbling the book was. I actually saw a lot of myself in Angel, which is interesting because obviously she was a prostitute. I can see a lot of myself in her because, firstly, it broke down my any kind of self-righteous stance that I am better than a prostitute, because I'm not, and none of us are. But especially in her desire for independence and making her own way. So Michael helped me realize that because he never tried to portray himself as better than her, instead he acknowledges his own sin, his own desires, his own lusts, and these are all things that we experience. And he's like even the part where he talks about how like he's no different to her, because like, so in the Bible, in the book, Angel didn't actually kill anybody, but she did something that made her feel like it led to somebody's death. And he explained to her how like even his thoughts of killing people is just the same, and she can understand that, but he's trying to resonate with her and also bring biblical reference into it. That is just so comforting to realize that he's never trying to make himself look like I'm your savior. He never actually did that. Like, she was the one who kind of portrayed him as the savior of her life, but he never positioned himself in that place. He always said that everything is from God, everything happens from God, everything I'm able to do is from God. One of the really great things that I loved about the book was the description of making love and the portrayal of what it actually is like. The world even shies away from it or makes it perverse. There's like no in between. But I feel like God says there is. No, I feel like God does say there is. Christians have done a very, very poor job. A very, very poor job at discussing sex. The things that I've learned about sex in the last couple of years, it's been so redemptive, so pure, so honest. And it's not come from church. It's come from like conversations with friends, long conversations with friends. It's come from God himself, actually. And people who are either get it or are trying to figure it out the same way that I'm trying to figure it out and just understand it. I love how Francine made Michael honest about his desires, how honest he was, but also how he really did flee. The guy really fleed. He really fleed. He really did. He really revered God. And he said, no, I must go. Let me actually read a passage. I think this is one of the times. So, okay, to give context, Michael actually paid to visit Angel multiple times, because he kept on convincing her that he wanted to take her away, make her his wife, and literally get her out of prostitution. She obviously couldn't understand this. She said that there's been multiple men who's come and told me this, like, go away. So she had a very, 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 very hard heart. She would not go with him, but he kept on coming back and paying. This is part of what I didn't really understand. Not love, but like, it was just like, this just wouldn't work in the modern day, kind of going to somebody for the first time and telling them that, like, you're my wife. Like, that's the kind of thing that we joke about now in the church. But I think back in the day, maybe that had a bit more contextual normality. But also, contextually, short for time, can't really see her anything outside of being invited into her room. So you kind of got to cut to the chase. But yeah, so this passage is the time he went, and obviously when people pay for time with her, they pay to sleep with her. But he was not paying for that. He was paying to talk with her and trying to get her out. But there was a time, this guy's actually, like, he loves her. He's actually infatuated by her. So it's very difficult for him. He says losing himself, he cupped her face. This was after she said his name, I think, for the first time, and she was just avoiding saying his name. The feel of her skin made him forget why he was there, and he kissed her. It's about time. That's what she said. She moved forward against him, setting him on fire. Her hands moved, and he knew if he didn't stop, he would lose. Not just the battle, but the whole war. When she unbuttoned his shirt and slipped her hand in, he jerked back from her. Jesus, he said. Jesus! So, stunned, she looked up at him. It came to her with a shock of clear understanding. How did you manage to make it to the ripe old age of 26 without ever having been with a woman? He opened his eyes. I made a decision to wait for the right one. And you really think I'm it? She laughed at him. You poor, dumb fool. She finally got to him. Jesus, I misunderstood. This can't be the one you sent for me. This is like internal thoughts. He could spend the rest of his life trying to make her understand. He wanted to grab her and shake her and call her all kinds of a fool. And all she did was look back at him with that smile on her face as though she had finally figured him all out. He was labelled and put in a bin. Michael lost his temper. If that's the way you want it, so be it. He slammed at the door, straight down the hall. He went down the stairs, straight out the casino, slammed the swinging doors up, out of his way and went out. There was a lot of moments like that where he kind of fell a little bit, but then was like, no. What I also respect is that he refrained from sleeping with her in the marriage as well. So when they got to the point where they were married, which was a whole other story, it was still a case where she felt she wasn't enough with him. He knew that she wasn't married in her heart, but he was. So there was still that kind of lack of an equal yoke. He knew that her understanding of sex was something that was for the man, not for the woman. Was for work, not for love. He knew that if he did so, then it would be to her as if he was just taking advantage of her and like all of the other men. So he actually waited for her to understand it and understand it as love. Yeah, that was great. Okay, so the next thing I would say is that it produced both unhealthy and healthy like emotions in me. That's not down to the book. The book was written purely and great, but more so down to just my ability to amplify things beyond what the book is actually saying. Also, another thing I love is Michael's character. I think he's really funny. I think he's funny. Like, especially the parts where, because there was basically, her real name is not Angel. That was her prostitute name. He didn't want to call her that because that was the name that she was given as a prostitute. So he would just call her other names, like, just like literally random names. Like the first name he called her was Mara because he said that means bitter. And he was just like, you're bitter, mate. Like, she bitter. So he would call her Mara and then call her other names like Amanda, Tizar. So it would be like the most random moment. Like, I think there was a time they were on the mountain together when they were married, and he was just like he was like holding her face. And he was like, oh, Tizar. She's probably thinking, like, who is this guy? Just calling me different names every 5 seconds. I found that really funny. And it was only at the end of the book that he found out her real name. I love Michael's patience as well. And also I love his obedience. Like, it's so difficult to keep going back to the brothel, paying money to see a woman who doesn't want to see you at all. She rolls her eyes when she sees you. She'd rather sleep with you and say, just get this over with. I don't want to talk to you. Or even still running after her when she would run away. Like, she ran away, just like Gomer in the Bible. She would run away, find ways to get back to where she was, and he would go after her. And even also the time where she she told Michael indirectly that she was leaving, and this was probably the hardest part, letting her go, because that was the time where she made him an idol. She didn't know God. She didn't even believe God. She had to go and find God for herself, and it was years before she came back, and he had to fight the urge of going to look for her like he did before, because he knew she had to go and find God and make God her God and not make Michael her God. Another dynamic I really loved was Paul and Miriam. Paul was a guy, I didn't like him at first, but he redeemed himself through his own understanding of his wrongdoings and humbling himself before the Lord. And I like the dynamic between Paul and Miriam, because Miriam was really, really good for Paul. And it kind of just goes to show that some people, not even some people, I think all of us in a sense, we just need that kind of companion or partner that helps you kind of reveal something in ourselves or take something out of ourselves that we never would have been able to do alone. Because the bitterness that Paul had as a single man, or widowed man, and then in his relationship with Miriam, how that kind of progressed. Like, he still had the hatred that he had for Angel, but then it progressed into understanding her. which wouldn't have been able to be done without Miriam, because Miriam was a very close friend of Angel, and Miriam was able to see Angel the way that God saw her. There's a specific page. I was reading this on the train literally this week, and my heart just kind of was just so warm at. This was the part where Paul went back. Paul was the one who went back to find Angel after those years, and you can imagine, you'd think it'd either be Miriam, you'd think it'd be Michael. It was somebody who didn't love her, but Miriam actually sent Paul to go so that he could see Angel the way that they were seeing Angel, because he thought they were warped in the mind, but it was actually him who was warped in the mind. And Miriam was just so good for Paul. He sat for a long time unable to speak, thinking of all the time and all the persecution she had endured from him, and now she was apologizing. He had plotted her destruction and destroyed himself in the process. From that time he had been consumed by hatred, blinded by it. I have been insufferable and self-righteous and cruel. The revelation was bitter and painful, but a relief too. There was an odd sort of freedom in standing before a mirror and seeing himself clearly for the first time in his life. If it hadn't been for Miriam, what would he have become? Loving her had softened him. She had seen something in him. He'd never imagined anyone but Tess could see. That was his late wife. And she'd seen something in Angel he couldn't. He had wondered at it, but he had stubbornly held to his own convictions. Michael's wife had always been Angel to him, etc., etc. Now that he thought back, he couldn't remember one time when she had defended herself. Why hadn't she? He knew the answer to that as well. She had just given it to him when she said he was right about her. It hadn't been disdain or arrogance that kept her silent. It had been shame. She believed everything he said about her. She believed she was soiled and unworthy, fit only to be used. And I helped convince her. I filled the role Michael refused to play. Remorse overwhelmed him. It hurt to look at her. And he basically asked for her forgiveness. I love the dynamic of him understanding something for himself, which is a lot of the time what God does with us. Like, he will find a way for us to understand something ourselves, not just someone telling us. Because he was told multiple times about the true character of Angel, and that was through Michael and that was through Miriam. And imagine two accounts of people that you trust and love, like your literal wife and your best friend, are telling you about a woman, and that they've spent more time with, and you're telling them that no, that's not who she is. Like, she's this witch, she's just this, she's that. And for him to kind of understand for himself that she was everything opposite to what he couldn't see, because he had scales over his eyes, and he kept to his own narrative because it was safe for him. And I guess his narrative protected him from feeling any kind of remorse. Everything that he thought she was, he kind of was. Like, he thought she was arrogant, but he was kind of arrogant. He thought she was bitter, and she was this, but he was that. And the fact that he was able to humble himself and take on that, without this moment, his marriage with Miriam would not have been saved, because of the depth and length of the relationship that Angel and Miriam had, the truth of that he couldn't comprehend. If he didn't comprehend that truth, it would have just created this solid line between them. So, interesting dynamic. The things that I didn't love, very, very small. Not many. I've been told the movie is bad. There's a movie that depicts this. I don't know if I'm going to watch it. I feel like I'm going to stick to my imagination because I think it's going to be better. I might watch the trailer and see the vibe. But from what I've been told, yeah, keep to the book. Another thing is, I think beauty standards is a very difficult thing to tackle with this book. I think it can definitely become an easily difficult argument here. The word beautiful is thrown around for some and not for others, which can kind of create this automatic stereotypical image of what beautiful is supposed to look like, which is a little bit sad. Like, I think in your mind, automatically when you hear beautiful, you can kind of picture this idea in your mind when somebody's kind of called beautiful. And then if it even goes on to describe what kind of features they have, again, it can fall into the stereotype as well. But I do respect the time that it was written in and the standard that they had back then, which was a lot, very, very different to the standard of beauty now. In some ways different, in some ways actually still the same. And in terms of the elitism and restricted sense of belief of what a beautiful person is still here today. But again, it was still very different in the 1800s. The beginning threw me off. This is something that I can't say I didn't like it. It's just that I didn't have the headspace for it. At the time, I was just not ready to read a lot about hurt and tragedy and sadness. That's what the beginning started off as. There was a lot of that stuff. So I wasn't kind of emotionally stable to hear those things. I feel like it just made me feel a bit worse. So I just put the book down and I picked it up again in January. and that's when I allowed the stories to progress. When I felt that urge to pick it up, I just felt that sense of, Angela, why don't you read through until you see the good part? And I guess for some reason I thought the good part would start, or the love story would start from page 1, and it didn't. I don't know why I thought that, but yeah. Again, I respect the time of the book that it was written, but one thing that, although I like the dialogue of them showing their voice, God's voice, the enemy's voice, there is the sense of like feeling like I don't really speak to God like that. The dialogue did feel a little bit curated in terms of how Michael spoke to God, or how God was kind of the words that were being put in their minds at the time. Again, maybe, yeah, but now, don't speak like that to him. I do appreciate actually how real Angel was. There was a prayer that she prayed at the end that felt very real. Again, makes sense with her upbringing and her new understanding of God. I feel like she spoke to him more like I do, I think. That's kind of what I'd speak about in regards to the book. I try to say a lot without telling you the whole kind of thing. I think you should definitely read it for yourself. If I was to describe the book in one word, the word would actually be redemptive, which is funny because it's called Redeeming Love. But yes, it was very redemptive in many ways for me. Overall rating out of 10, 8.5. I think you can't really give 10, but like 8.5 is, yeah, like very high for me. Like, very good book. Did it meet my expectations? It absolutely exceeded them. Absolutely. I didn't actually come with many. I think I just prayed that it wouldn't be a cheesy romance novel, and it wasn't. I plan on reading the rest of her books as well. I'm thinking of reading A Voice in the Wind or A Lineage of Grace next, but I think overall it just sparked my love for fiction again, which is something that I just really wanted. I would say, why don't you recommend some fiction in the comments? I'm not too fussed about the genre. I just want something that's good. Anything that has good storytelling is my cup of tea. So yeah, I hope you like that. Never done a book review before on this page. So yeah, I'll catch you guys later and have a good day.